The glass of red wine in my hand trembled slightly, the liquid rippling with the rhythm of my heartbeat. The laughter and clinking glasses around me slowed into a strange, echoing blur. I could feel it, every glance of condescension slicing through me like 100 tiny needles. The man in the navy suit standing in front of me tilted his head, smirking as he asked, "You're still holding up, huh, Rebecca? Or are you peeling potatoes on some dusty base out in the middle of nowhere?" I stayed silent, the cold of his words settling deep into my bones. It had been 20 years. I thought I'd forgotten that voice, that smug look, but the past returned in a flood, dragging me under. In the ballroom of Aspen Grove Resort, I was a ghost in a room full of spotlights. The chandelier sparkled like it belonged in Versailles, ivory tablecloths, crystal centerpieces, and guests dressed like senators and CEOs. The 20-year reunion of Jefferson High's graduating class looked like a gala for minor royalty. And me, Rebecca Williams, stood off to the side in a dark blue dress, hair pinned neatly, face composed, heart in a vice. I shouldn't have come. I should have ignored the polite email invite. But part of me still held on to the foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, things would be different now. And now I realized the only thing that changed was the sharpness of their cruelty. I glanced around the room again. My older sister, Emma, stood at the center, wrapped in a scarlet sheath dress that screamed success. She was everything the crowd adored, commanding, charismatic, brilliant. Holding a champagne flute in one hand, she lifted the mic in the other and smiled with practiced warmth. "And of course," she said with a light laugh, "I have to thank my uniquely talented sister, Rebecca, who's here with us tonight, living a life, well, all her own." Laughter rippled through the room. I didn't blink. Emma had always had that gift, dressing bullets in velvet. I scanned the crowd again. No one made eye contact. My name tag read Rebecca W. in plain black print. No title, no mention of rank, just like she wanted. I wondered what they would say if they knew that the woman standing quietly at the edge of the party in a thrifted blue dress wasn't just some forgotten veteran, but a lieutenant general, commander of one of the most classified joint operations in U.S. military history. The air tightened. I stepped onto the balcony, searching for oxygen. The cold air kissed my skin, calmer than the sting of polite cruelty. But before I could breathe, the door hissed open behind me. Jason. His suit was sharper than I remembered, so was his tone. "You always liked the view from the edge, huh, Rebecca?" he said, swirling his scotch. I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "You used to be top of the class, valedictorian, debate team queen, full ride to Harvard Law, and then, poof, Army." He laughed, short and bitter. "Still can't wrap my head around it. What were you thinking?" I looked at him slowly, calmly. "I was thinking," I said, "that maybe I was meant for something bigger." Jason scoffed. "Bigger than Harvard? Bigger than me?" His words echoed, just like the last time we stood face to face, on graduation night, in the hallways outside the dorms. I had told him I'd accepted West Point, and he walked away. No goodbye. Just gone. Now here he was again, still angry at a choice that had nothing to do with him. I smiled, the same smile I'd worn through war rooms and satellite bunkers. Something like that. And then, like fate had cued it, the low thrum of a helicopter shook the air. The sound grew louder, sharper. Everyone inside froze. Jason's face twisted into confusion. "What the hell is that?" Guests turned toward the windows. The wind picked up, ruffling napkins, rustling hair. A black military helicopter hovered over the resort's front lawn, floodlights cutting across the party like search beams. Someone screamed. Glass shattered. Emma dropped her champagne. The helicopter began its descent. Then the door opened. Colonel Marcus Ellison stepped out, dress uniform crisp, chest gleaming with ribbons. He didn't glance at anyone else. His eyes locked on me. 3 steps from me, he squared his shoulders and saluted. "Lieutenant General Williams, ma'am, the Pentagon requires your immediate presence." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a phone. Jason turned pale. Emma stumbled a step, her mouth open but silent. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't blink. I placed the wine glass in Jason's stunned hand. Sorry to interrupt the reunion. We'll catch up later if I remember your name. I turned and walked away, past their gasps, their stares, their disbelief. The world they knew had just shattered, and I hadn't even started yet. As I climbed into the helicopter, the door hissed shut. The pilot spoke through his comm. "Ma'am, we've got a situation. Project Merlin has been compromised. Level red. We need your eyes on it." I buckled in, and I smiled. The war wasn't behind me. It was just beginning. The moment I stepped into the helicopter, I knew the biggest secret of my life was about to unravel. The chopper lifted off, rattling hard against the night wind. Red cabin lights flickered like a heartbeat. I leaned back against the wall, eyes staring into nothing. The thunder of the blades couldn't drown out the memories flooding in. 20 years ago, everything was different. I was top of my class, the golden girl of Jefferson High. Debate captain, student government, early admission to Harvard Law. Nobody thought I'd ever stray from that path. Nobody but me. Jason, my then boyfriend, had been the loudest protester. I still remember the fury in his voice when I told him my decision, the way he clenched his jaw under the hallway lights. "You're throwing everything away, Rebecca. Harvard, law, us." "I'm not throwing it away," I told him. "I'm choosing something bigger." "Bigger than me?" he snapped. He walked out of my life that night. No goodbye, no call, just silence. But the one who truly hurt me wasn't Jason. It was my sister, Emma. Emma was the star of the family. Elegant, brilliant, magnetic. She was always the favorite, and I didn't mind, not at first. I stayed in the background, did my work, made my own way. But when I told her I'd joined the military instead of Harvard, she simply tilted her head and said, "I'm sure you have your reasons, Rebecca. Just don't be surprised if you regret it." She said it like a joke, but it wasn't. Not long after, she made sure I disappeared. While I was buried in tactical drills and midnight PT at West Point, Emma contacted our high school alumni board and quietly removed my name from every honor roll and public listing. I didn't find out until years later, when I ran into Mr. Walters, our old AP history teacher. He blinked in shock when he saw me. "Rebecca? We thought you left the country or something. Your sister said you didn't want to be listed in any alumni publications." My breath had caught in my throat that day. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I smiled instead, and nodded like it was nothing. That was my first real lesson in silence. Not just keeping it, but being buried by it. And now, as I sat in a military-grade chopper slicing through the night, every buried truth was rising from its grave. I closed my eyes, asking myself, why had I allowed it to go on so long? Why did I never push back? Was it fear? Pride? Or that quiet, unrelenting belief that the truth would outlive the lies? A voice crackled through the headset. "Lieutenant General Williams, we're landing in 3. General Monroe is waiting." A midnight briefing at the Pentagon is never a good thing. I descended onto the tarmac and moved swiftly through the halls. Security guards stood straighter when I passed. Their eyes didn't just acknowledge, they respected. That used to unsettle me. Now it reminded me I belonged. The doors to the secure briefing room swung open. The light was harsh. General Monroe stood by the table, arms crossed, eyes already on me. "Rebecca, we have a problem. A serious one." My breath stilled. "Merlin?" He nodded grimly. "Leaked. Or, more accurately, pierced. Someone breached the database and exfiltrated preliminary intercepts. The system flagged it under your clearance zone, but we think that was intentional. We've traced the source to a civilian terminal.
registered to Emma Williams. My blood turned cold. Emma? He continued, slower now. She didn't act alone. There's chatter, coordinated action, internal politics, a smear campaign. And Rebecca, it's already begun. Media outlets are picking up stories, leaks, misquotes. They're painting you as rogue, as dangerous, as compromised. I stared at the files spread across the table, my face on a dozen screenshots, headlines calling me a traitor. Whispers that I had taken military secrets for personal gain. Conspiracies, paranoia, lies. Emma was behind it. My own sister. The same sister who toasted me hours ago under golden chandeliers. The same sister who quietly erased me once before. Now, she was trying to bury me again. Only this time, for good. Monroe's voice cut in. I've pushed back what I can, but Rebecca, the press doesn't want the truth. They want a story. Unless we act, you're going to lose everything. I lifted my eyes to meet his. No, I said. I won't let her win. He nodded slowly. Then you need to find out why she did this, fast, and bring me evidence, hard, undeniable. Because when this hits the House Intelligence Committee, I can't protect you without it. I turned away from the table, spine rigid, mind racing. For so long, I had avoided confronting Emma. I thought staying silent was strength. I was wrong. She had stolen my name once. Now she was trying to take my identity, my integrity, my future. No more. Not again. Not this time. As I walked out of the war room, one question burned in my mind. If your own sister can betray you, who can you trust?
Betrayal doesn't just come with a dagger. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a microphone. By sunrise, the damage was spreading. Chloe's voice, the perfectly poised, crisp tone of a federal appointee, had been turned into sound bites, lifted and remixed by influencers, podcasters, talking heads. Her casual remarks at the reunion were now trending across platforms. Some people prefer the shadows. Service is admirable, but leadership is where change happens. They weren't just quotes. They were weapons. And the worst part? She knew exactly what she was doing. Her podcast episode, My Sister, the Myth, had been released less than 12 hours after the helicopter lifted me from that lawn. In it, Chloe wove a narrative laced with just enough truth to sound credible and just enough poison to rot me from the inside out. She painted me as a glory hunter, accused me of hiding behind my rank to avoid scrutiny, of ghosting the family to craft a larger-than-life persona that the military conveniently backed. She didn't name me outright. She didn't have to. The internet filled in the blanks. Memes flooded Twitter. Deep State Barbie, Lieutenant Liar. She probably never even served. A video of me stepping into the helicopter, hair whipping, coat flaring, was captioned, "When your cosplay goes too far." And then came the real hit. My security clearance was flagged by civilian misinformation monitors. Pentagon liaison officers began whispering that I had become a civilian risk vector. Chloe hadn't just hurt my reputation, she had weaponized public doubt. Inside my temporary office in D.C., I stared at the glowing screens, messages piling up, press requests exploding, hate mail thickening. One video theorized I was just an actress playing a general, hired to distract from real military failures. Another accused me of being the reason for a NATO data breach. I didn't respond. I didn't post. But inside, something colder than anger formed. This wasn't just sibling rivalry anymore. It was war. That's when Melissa Jan, one of the few former classmates who hadn't laughed at me the night before, sent me a voice message. I hesitated. Then I played it. Her voice was urgent. "Rebecca, I just spoke with Jason. He said Chloe once asked the school to take your name off the alumni honors list, not because you requested it, but because she thought your military path would confuse the narrative. I think there's more. She deleted something back then, something about a Medal of Honor nomination? He didn't want to say more on the phone." I froze. Medal of Honor? There had been whispers years ago after a classified operation. I'd been told the nomination didn't go through due to paperwork irregularities. I'd believed it. Moved on. But now? Now I needed proof. 2 hours later, I met Jason in a secure office suite near the Pentagon. He looked older, frayed around the edges, his usual polished demeanor stripped bare. "You should have told me years ago," he said, rubbing his hands together. "Back then, I thought Chloe was just managing the situation. She forwarded an email thread to the school board saying you didn't want recognition. I assumed it was your request." "Did it look like your writing?" I asked flatly. He hesitated. "No." I stood, walked to the file cabinet. My fingers trembled as I opened the drawer. "I need to find it," I muttered. That's when Melissa entered. She wasn't empty-handed. She carried a manila folder like it held a loaded gun. "I found it," she said. Inside, a printed email, dated 2018, subject line, Medal of Honor, nomination, Lieutenant General Rebecca J. Cole. Request? Withdraw all pending public citations due to the recipient's desire for anonymity. Sender? Chloe Cole, DOJ address. Signed with her name. My stomach twisted. I never asked for that. She had intercepted the nomination, used her access, lied to the committee, and shut it down, without ever telling me. Jason whispered, "She didn't just try to erase you. She tried to make sure no one else ever saw you." I nodded, numb. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Melissa, determined as ever, returned 2 hours later with another folder. Inside, the digital forensics of Chloe's podcast distribution. IP trails, upload timestamps, metadata. And a connection I hadn't expected. A media consulting firm called Apex Path Strategies, owned by a shell company, registered under Emma Cole, Chloe's birth name. It wasn't a spontaneous podcast. It was a campaign. Backed, funded, released with precision. Everything clicked. The slow undermining at the reunion, the stage toast, the way she called for the golden trio photo, knowing I had been publicly erased for decades. Her condescension wasn't offhand. It was bait. She wanted me to react, to explode, to destroy myself. And when I didn't, she did it for me. But she had underestimated one thing. I wasn't the girl in the hallway anymore. I wasn't the cadet with shaky hands and too much to prove. I was the Lieutenant General Cole. And now I had everything I needed to fight back. That night, I prepared a briefing package. Not for the press, not for the public, but for the one place Chloe couldn't touch. The Pentagon. Internal Ethics Board. It included the intercepted Medal of Honor nomination, the email signed under DOJ credentials, the metadata linking her to Apex Path Strategies, and a full analysis of disinformation campaigns using her voice. I submitted it silently. No press, no tweet. Just the truth, buried like a blade, ready to cut. And as I hit send, I finally exhaled.
Not because I had won, but because I was done playing their game. Chloe tried to delete me from the story. Now I was rewriting the ending.
They didn't just try to erase me, they tried to replace me. By the next morning, the narrative was spinning out of control. News anchors ran segments with my photo blurred beside headlines like, "The general who vanished, then returned, why now?" Political pundits questioned my rank, my service, my silence. And Chloe? She was everywhere. Podcasts, panels, morning interviews, speaking with calm authority about narrative control in public institutions. She never said my name, but the knife still landed. And it cut deeper because she smiled while twisting it. Meanwhile, the Pentagon stayed publicly silent. No confirmation, no denial. Internally, I was cleared, but publicly, I was radioactive. Even allies began distancing themselves. One email from a retired admiral read, "Rebecca, proud of you always, but until this blows over, I have to step back." What this was, no one could define. Because Chloe hadn't accused me of anything concrete, she accused me of existing too powerfully. Her tactics were effective. Subtle slander, passive-aggressive concern, the kind that made people doubt what they saw, what they knew. And it worked. Until I decided to speak. I didn't go on television. I didn't hold a press conference. I walked into the Jefferson High Legacy Ceremony uninvited. Dressed in my uniform, coat buttoned to the throat, ribbons aligned. There was no music, no announcement, just me walking up the central aisle while Chloe stood on stage in her ivory pantsuit, smiling into cameras. She saw me and faltered. A half second, barely visible. But I saw it. Her composure cracked, a flicker of fear behind her eyes. I didn't stop. I reached the foot of the stage and requested the mic. The alumni chair, confused but curious, nodded. Cameras turned, chairs creaked. I took the stage. I didn't introduce myself. I pulled out a single photo, me in full dress uniform beside General Aubrey Clean at NATO command. The silver star on my shoulder caught the light. I held it high and waited. Silence swept the room. Then, calmly, I spoke. "My name is Rebecca J. Cole, Jefferson class of 2003, founder of the International Relations Club, first chair in orchestra, and the girl you all stopped seeing after I chose to serve." A ripple moved through the audience. I laid down a folder, documents, Melissa and I had compiled, redacted operations, nomination letters, military acknowledgments. These are parts of a life that happened beyond this auditorium, quietly, without applause, but with purpose. I paused. Some people serve loudly. Others do so without asking to be seen. That doesn't make us invisible. Someone near the front wiped their eyes. I was told silence was strength. And for years, I believed that. But silence also gives liars space. And some lies grow into legends. I looked at Chloe. Until someone tells the truth. The fallout was immediate. The alumni chair stood and said into the mic, "It's time we correct a mistake. General Cole, your name belongs on our wall." Applause followed. Not thunderous, but real. Grounded. That night, I received a call from the White House. They were reinstating the Medal of Honor process, publicly. A week later, I stood on the South Lawn. The president himself placed the ribbon around my neck and said, "We honor not just a soldier, but a sentinel, someone who chose duty over noise." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I let the moment pass through me like light through glass. Not for validation, but because it was true. But Chloe wasn't finished. Her podcast dropped a second episode, Narrative versus Narcissism.
when power becomes persona. It was slick, polished, smug, but this time it backfired. Veterans pushed back. Civilians asked questions. Reporters found the documents Melissa had uncovered, the metadata, the emails, the nomination block. Truth had a timestamp, and Chloe had left fingerprints all over it. Within 48 hours, public opinion shifted. People were just defending me. They were demanding answers from her. She went quiet. For once, she didn't spin, didn't post, didn't podcast. The final blow came quietly. A letter slipped under my door. No signature, no flourish, just 4 handwritten words on a single card. Can we talk? Inside was a photo. 2 girls. Us. Halloween night. Both in camo costumes, saluting, one grinning wide, the other, me, stone serious. I stared at it for a long time. The past doesn't vanish. It waits. And when I met her at a small cafe 3 days later, she looked tired. Not disheveled, just human. We sat in silence. Then she slid a velvet box across the table. Inside, my Medal of Honor nomination form. The original. Unsigned, untouched. She said softly. I kept it. I don't know why. I looked at her. Saw no performance, no press angle, just my sister. I asked, why? She took a long breath. Because I didn't want you gone. I just didn't know how to stand beside you. I spent years trying to be louder, but all I really wanted was to be seen by you. I didn't forgive her right then, but I reached across the table, placed my hand on hers, and whispered, then stop running. I didn't wear medals to be admired, but as I walked back to the Pentagon that evening, the light caught the silver star on my shoulder, and for once, I let it shine. Not for them, but for me.
I once thought silence was my shield, but silence, it turns out, only works when no one's forging your story in the dark. The news cycle shifted. Again. But this time, it tilted in my favor. Veteran groups issued statements of support. Public figures posted side-by-sides, Chloe's words versus the evidence Melissa had uncovered. Commentators who once mocked me now called Chloe's podcast a masterclass in passive aggression weaponized for personal gain. But even with the public tide turning, I wasn't satisfied, because truth in the media doesn't guarantee justice behind closed doors. And Chloe? She still had allies, ties in legal departments, media firms, shadowy consultants who owed her favors. Her fall from grace wasn't enough. Not until she admitted what she had done. I didn't want vengeance. I wanted clarity. And I needed the world to understand something vital. This wasn't sibling drama. It was a playbook on how power manipulates memory. The real twist came quietly, late one night. Melissa showed up at my temporary quarters with something in her hand that made my blood chill. A thumb drive. No label. Just one word scrawled in Sharpie. Colonel. What is it? I asked. She set it on the table carefully. Jason said Clubby used to keep a backup archive of her DOJ correspondence, emails she didn't want on official systems. This was in an old laptop they used to share during college. He found it, buried under photos, encrypted. My breath caught. Melissa opened her laptop, inserted the drive. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. Then folders. Thousands of them. Most irrelevant, but 3 stood out. Folder 1, Rebecca DNC. Folder 2, West Point coverage. Folder 3, Silence Ops. I clicked. Inside were draft press statements, blocks on media outlets, communications with 2 PR agencies tasked with quiet repositioning of my name in online databases.
One file showed a full psychological profile Chloe had commissioned on me. Another revealed correspondence between her and Epic's Path about suppressing my name in a civilian cyber honor roll list. The files were dated. One of them went as far back as 2009. I clenched my fists. This wasn't about one podcast. This was a 15-year campaign of erasure. And suddenly, it all made sense. Why I never got interview requests when peers did, why old professors never reached out, why a major defense publication skipped my name in a roundup of decorated female generals. Because she scrubbed it all. Why? I muttered, half to myself. Melissa shook her head. Because you didn't let her narrate you. She couldn't control your story, so she buried it. I stood, pacing the room. My mind was loud, clear. I want this out, I said. Not through tabloids, not podcasts, not clickbait. Melissa nodded slowly. We publish. A book. Your version, with documents, context, reflection, and I'll co-author. I looked at her. Won't that drag you into the line of fire? She smiled. I was already in it the moment I stood beside you on that stage. 2 weeks later, we began writing. It wasn't memoir. It was record. We called it Leading in Silence. We didn't write it to destroy Chloe. We wrote it to rebuild everything she tried to erase. And with each chapter, I remembered. Not just the betrayals, but the victories. The op in Tbilisi, where I negotiated a ceasefire without firing a shot. The night in Kandahar, when I led a rescue mission after intel failed. The 3 a.m. call from NATO command, "Ma'am, we need your eyes." And the silence after, when no one outside the room ever knew. Each entry was quiet, precise, no fanfare, just fact. Meanwhile, Chloe was unraveling. Her third podcast episode barely got downloads. The fourth was pulled after legal challenges. Then came the reckoning. A Senate Oversight Subcommittee launched a quiet inquiry into her DOJ communications. Nothing criminal, yet, but enough to unnerve her allies. She stepped back from media, stopped posting, froze all official accounts. One day she texted me, "I'm done. For now, you win." I stared at the screen for a long time, then deleted the message, because it was never about winning. It was about standing again, fully, without compromise. The day Leading in Silence went to press, a package arrived at my Pentagon office. Inside was a photo, a group of cadets, all women, each one holding up a sign that read, "She led so we could be seen." My throat tightened. On the back of the photo, a note in fine handwriting. "General Cole, we read your words. Now we're ready to write our own." I sat down. Let myself feel it. The ache, the pride, the strange stillness of being seen after so long. That night, walking past the Hall of Service, I stopped at the legacy wall. My name wasn't on it. Not yet. But beside me stood Melissa, a publisher's rep, and a cadet with a pen and clipboard. "Shall we?" Melissa asked. I nodded. For once, not to approve, just to allow. She filled in the name slot slowly, carefully. Rebecca J. Cole, Integrity in Silence. No titles, no rank. Just truth. Just presence. Justice didn't come with parades or podiums. It came in pixels, papers, whispers passed between brave women, quiet gestures that refused to vanish. And I realized then, revenge fades, but truth remains. And Chloe? She disappeared into the quiet she used to control, while I, finally, stood in it by choice.
Reclaiming my voice didn't feel like triumph. It felt like exhale. The Pentagon felt different now. Same walls, same hallways, same echo of boots on tile. But now, I wasn't just walking through it. I was seen in it. A presence, not a shadow. The Medal of Honor ceremony was behind me. The book was at print. The investigations into Chloe's actions had gone quiet, but not gone away. And for the first time in years, I wasn't on a battlefield or in a bunker. I was in a classroom. At Fort Liberty. It wasn't glamorous. The walls were beige, the desks were dented, the ventilation groaned like a tired soldier. But it was perfect. 30 cadets sat at attention, their eyes sharp, notebooks open. I stood at the front, uniform crisp, posture steady. But no medals, no ribbons. Just a name tag. Lieutenant General Cole, retired. Instructor. Today's topic is ethical leadership in asymmetric environments. A few cadets raised brows. I smiled faintly. That's just a fancy way of asking, what do you do when the system works against you? A rustle. Then a voice, young, curious, female. Ma'am, what did you do? I paused, looked at her, and said quietly, I led, anyway. The class went still, not out of fear, but respect, because they understood what it meant to lead when no one's watching. Midway through the session, there was a knock at the door. I turned. Chloe. No makeup, jeans and a blazer, a camera bag over her shoulder. Hope I'm not interrupting, she said. You could hear the hesitation in her breath. You're on base? I asked. I'm working with a docuseries crew, Women in Command. Thought I'd start where I should have started years ago. I raised an eyebrow. That's a long way from podcast snark. She shrugged. People change. Before I could respond, Melissa appeared, behind her, smiling, holding up a folder. They want to turn the book into a leadership curriculum. Co-authors. You in? I looked between the two women, my past and my present, and nodded once. Let's write it right. After class, the cadets gathered at the front. One handed me a poster board they had drawn together. Silhouettes in uniform, medals inked in gold. And in the center, my face, half in shadow, half in light. At the top, in looping script, Our General. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you, I said, voice soft but steady. But remember, command isn't about shouting. I paused. It's about showing up when it's hardest, too. They nodded. A few scribbled it down, the kind of quote they'd carry into their own hard moments. As the room cleared out, I returned to my desk. My secure tablet blinked red. High priority request. Subject, Ghost Viper reactivation. Clearance, black. I opened it. Cyber Task Force, classified intercept. Threat vector, Eastern Theater. No location. No name. Just one line at the bottom. You're still the fulcrum. I stared at the words. My pulse didn't spike. My breath didn't hitch. It just settled. Because I knew exactly what I was now. Not a myth, not a shadow. A fulcrum. A force. One that didn't break under pressure, but pivoted the whole field. Later that week, I stood once more in Jefferson High. This time, not in exile, but in ceremony. The Hall of Legacy had changed. A new wing, more light, new names, and one plaque freshly installed. Rebecca J. Cole, Class of 2003, Integrity and Silence. No medals, no stars, just the truth. Chloe stood beside the podium, holding a short speech. She met my eyes, then read, She served without needing to be seen, but today we choose to see her, not for rank, not for medals, but for what she stood for, when no one was watching. She stepped down, didn't look for applause. Melissa stood nearby, a well-worn copy of Leading in Silence in her hand. The crowd murmured. Cameras flashed. A few cadets stood the back, hands behind their backs, proud. Once whispered to her classmate, She's the reason I applied. I turned, just enough to see her. I didn't smile.
I didn't speak. But I heard it, and I let it land. Because legacy isn't about who claps the loudest. It's about who still whispers your name when no one's listening.
Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives with a quiet step and changes everything. The White House ceremony was held on a clear spring morning. The South Lawn gleamed like a scene from a painting. Neatly trimmed grass, a white canopy flanked by rows of chairs, an orchestra playing something soft and reverent in the background. The seats were filled with generals, senators, families, and cadets in formal dress grays. I stood at attention near the platform. My uniform was immaculate. Ribbons aligned, gloves clean. My spine, a line of steel. I didn't look for Chloe, but I knew she was there, sitting beside Melissa in the third row, face unreadable, hands folded in her lap. This time there was no camera in her hand, no performance in her posture, just presence. The president approached the podium, calm, centered. Today, he began, we honor not just a soldier, but a sentinel, a woman who led in silence, who protected without seeking recognition, who chose integrity over noise. He paused, then turned, took the blue ribbon from the velvet case, and placed it over my shoulders. The Medal of Honor. The gold star caught the light, but I didn't flinch. I let it be there, not as a prize, but as proof that silence, too, leaves echoes. After the applause faded, I stepped to the microphone. Hundreds of eyes, reporters, students, world leaders. I didn't prepare a speech. I just breathed, then said, I used to believe silence was strength, that to serve meant to disappear. But I've learned something else. I scanned the crowd. Chloe met my gaze. She didn't look away. I continued. We don't serve for applause, but sometimes it's good to know we were never truly invisible. Soft applause followed. Not loud, but real. I stepped down, not triumphant, just clear. They offered me an office in the West Wing. I turned it down. Instead, I chose a classroom at Fort Liberty to teach, to pass it on, to help the next generation of leaders navigate war zones, not just on foreign soil, but in boardrooms, media rooms, and sometimes even at their own dinner tables. The lecture hall wasn't much. Beige walls, scratched desks, old light bulbs. But the students were everything. Bright, sharp, fierce. And every time I stood in front of them, I remembered why I fought, why I stayed silent, and why, finally, I chose to speak. One afternoon, Chloe visited again. Jeans, camera bag, and a tentative smile. She pulled me aside after class. She said, I've started over. New project. It's called Women Who Stayed. Not the loud ones, the steady ones. I nodded. She added, I'm interviewing quiet commanders, and I want your story to open the series. I paused, then said, only if I can edit the final cut. She laughed. That's fair. Melissa joined us moments later, holding a mock-up of a new edition of our book, Leading in Silence, second edition, curriculum version. The back cover featured testimonials from female cadets, commanders, even a few foreign dignitaries. One line stood out. Her silence taught louder than speeches. Later that week, the Pentagon reactivated Ghost Viper. I was asked to consult, not in secret, not in shadow, but in title. I stepped into the war room with my name on the wall, not erased. No more pseudonyms, no more whispers. Just General Cole, briefing the next phase of national defense. Confident, seen, steady. And then came the day Jefferson High added my name to their Hall of Legacy.
No ceremony, no camera crews, just students in blazers, alumni leaning quietly against the wall, and Chloe standing beside the plaque. She read aloud. She served without needing to be seen, but we choose to see her now not for the rank, but for the reason. She looked at me. For what she stood for when no one was watching. Melissa stepped beside her, reading the last line. Leadership doesn't echo in applause. It echoes in choices. I stepped back, let them take their photos, let them speak the words I'd once been denied. And as the crowd began to move again, one young cadet nudged her friend and whispered, "She's the reason I applied." I heard it. I didn't respond, because I didn't need to. My story was no longer buried. It was carried. By others. By future. By truth. That night, alone in my quarters, I opened my encrypted tablet. New alert. Subject: Cyber Vector Phoenix. High risk. Ghost Viper tasking imminent. I stared at it for a long moment. Not with fear, with purpose. Because I didn't disappear. I was simply doing my job where no one could see me. They mocked me once, called me invisible. Now they whisper my name in rooms I've never entered. Now they teach my decisions in halls I'll never walk again. Now they salute my silence. Because it wasn't weakness. It was armor. And I wore it until the world was ready to see.